You know, the prince said that time is like a river. But honestly, I can tell you that's wrong. Time is more like a circle, destined to repeat itself because people are just too fucking dense to learn from their mistakes. And just as they're unwilling to admit what was wrong, they also don't know what they're missing out on. But I guarantee you, if you haven't experienced it before, this will be a tale like none you have ever heard. The year is 1989.
Computer technology, it continues to amaze us.
I'm Batman.
The Simpsons, next Sunday.
I don't know about you guys, but as far as I'm concerned, this song's just about sucking dick. Maybe that's why everyone likes it so much. And The Prince of Persia is first released on the Apple II.
Even the price is small.
It was created and developed solely by Jordan Mechner. This guy, Big Jordan, was he was an up-and-coming programmer, video game designer, screenwriter, and later on a New York Times best-selling author because fuck it, why not? But seriously, buddy, calm down, alright? You're gonna start to make the rest of us look bad. I mean, I can barely get out of bed in the morning as it is, alright? The game took inspiration from the idyllic folktales of the 1001 Nights and used at the time revolutionary animation techniques which involved rotoscoping footage of his brother dressed up like a mental asylum escapee jumping around in a high school parking lot while they were avoiding security. Yeah, right. It was a 2D platforming action game following the story of an unnamed prince who must escape from the dungeons of a castle to rescue the princess from the machinations of the evil vizier Jafar. It's renowned for featuring a time-sensitive goal, requiring players to progress through all of its levels and then defeat the vizier in single combat within 1 hour, lest the princess meet an untimely end. Look, I understand that some of you start to draw comparisons to other stories with a Middle Eastern flair, viziers and princesses, but I can assure you there's no copyright infringement of any kind, and let's be real, if there was, the House of Mouse would have been all over that, like flies on shit. Anyway, the game received a very positive reception upon release, yet despite this, it was considered a commercial failure in North America, on account of only selling 7,000 copies during its first 2 years. Probably because they sold it on this piece of shit. Look, I'm telling you, nothing changes, alright? Keep that in mind. It's a recurring theme going forward. However, when it was made available, the game performed incredibly well in the Japanese and European markets, selling over 2 million copies worldwide just a year later.
Also, you know what they call cheese in Paris? What they call it? Le fromage.
The original Prince of Persia is considered a landmark and influential title. It's looked back on fondly, not just for using animation techniques that distinguished itself from other platformers at the time, but elevating the way that video games could be used as a narrative tool. And depending on who you ask, there's a real argument to be made that it's the first ever action-adventure game. It would go on to spawn 2 sequels, and although Mechner would initially design the second installment, he would ultimately choose to take a step back from the series in order to pursue other projects, acting more as a consultant that people would occasionally listen to. The third and final installment in the original Prince of Persia trilogy, Prince of Persia 3D, released in 1999. And yeah, it was a commercial failure, but looking back on it, it's easy to see why. The controls were clunky, the camera was difficult to work with, and at best, it was considered a Tomb Raider clone. I would also dare to say that a main plot point being that the princess is forced to marry a blood relative against her will, who happens to be a man-tiger hybrid, didn't necessarily sit well with players at the time. And before you ask, no, George R.R. Martin does not have a writing credit on this one. Unsurprisingly, Mechner then decided to distance himself from the series completely, feeling disconnected and burnt out, not only in light of the failure of Prince of Persia 3D, but The Last Express, another project he'd been working on in the background. Meanwhile, thanks to a Kevin O'Leary pump and dump scheme, Mattel, the ultimate owner of the Prince of Persia franchise at the time, was bleeding cash out the wazoo.
I have tremendous experience in the license space. You wish I was your partner.
Left with little choice, Mattel was forced to sell the subsidiary who owned the franchise, at a considerable loss, mind you, to a private equity firm who would then cut it up and sell it for parts.
Could you just hold on for 1 second?
Oh, okay.
Sublime!
And so it appeared that this would be the end of the franchise, destined to be nothing more than a footnote in the annals of time. That is, until a certain French publisher came along and picked it up in the bargain bin. In 2001, Ubisoft acquired the intellectual property rights to the Prince of Persia catalogue, and they decided it was time for the Prince to return. Intellectual property rights are a long and convoluted affair, and since I didn't waste my time doing a law degree, I'm going to keep things real simple for everyone, alright? All you need to know is that while Ubisoft had the rights to the Prince of Persia games, they didn't have the rights to the IP itself. Those were retained by Big Geordie. Therefore, Ubisoft needed his consent in order to produce new titles, and so it was that the then director of Ubisoft reached out to Geordie. Considering what happened last time, Mechner was naturally a little skeptical. So a little French whining and dining wasn't going to cut it. He needed to meet the team who would be responsible for creating the next title. Luckily enough, immediately following the acquisition of the Prince of Persia catalogue, Ubisoft had directed the Montreal team to begin work on a reboot. Led by Yannis Malat, the team started on the conceptual phase of the project, and then presented their vision for the Prince of Persia in the 21st millennium to Mechner himself. At first, Mechner didn't approve. Concepts and drawings, while nice, they just weren't enough. But it's all Yannis and the Montreal team had. And so they started over, and beginning with a team of just 7 talented people, they took a long hard look at what had made the original games so inspiring and enticing to begin with, and distilled them down to their core elements, and made those their guiding principles. And after a couple of months of hard work, trying to harness lightning in a bottle, the same way Mechner had done just 10 years prior, they again pitched their vision. Mechner's reaction? He requested to join the project. And as for what happened next, well, let me tell you a tale like none you have ever heard. The Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time is a 3D platforming action-adventure game released all the way back in 2003 and developed by the previously mentioned Ubisoft Montreal. It follows the story of the titular Prince of Persia on his misguided quest for honor and glory that somehow, despite the best of intentions, manages to devolve into a catastrophe of biblical proportions. It's a bittersweet story filled with wonderful things like meaningful character development, doomed romance, and fights with the elderly over who's entitled to a nation's wealth. Oh yeah, boys. This one's a certified hood classic. The Sands of Time received critical acclaim upon release. I mean, just look at all of his awards, man. I mean, they don't just hand them out to just anybody, right? In fact, it was so well received that it didn't just go on to inspire more sequels after reigniting interest in the franchise, it led to the creation of a fucking Disney movie. What makes this game special isn't the fact that it gave the series a fresh coat of Persian paint. No, it was the way that it completely captured the spirit of the originals and was so captivating in design that it convinced the original creator to join in its creation. It's a game that holds up even to this day, that despite lacking some technical polish, manages to achieve a concise and cohesive character-driven story. The rich, storybook-esque design coupled with a brilliant connection between the narrative and core gameplay elements make it truly something special. I am by no means hyperbolic when I say that this game puts most modern AAA titles to shame. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best game that Ubisoft has ever released, and at this rate, ever will. But enough glazing and foreplay. Let's get straight into it. Our journey begins from the minute we load into the game, which unfortunately, in of itself, is a puzzle to solve. Assuming you're playing this game on the PC, you'll need to do some fixes on your end in order to get the game into a playable state because, big surprise, it was never designed to run on modern hardware. Naturally, if you're playing on the original release consoles, the PlayStation 2, Xbox or GameCube, you won't have these issues, but I wouldn't argue that it's the superior way to play the game either. Thankfully, there's plenty of helpful guides available on Steam to help you resolve all of these issues, and depending on what level of effort you want to go through, it shouldn't take you more than half an hour to set up. But everybody's different. Some people struggle to follow basic instructions, so be generous and give yourself at least an hour or two. Here's a few things to keep in mind. First off, remember to start the game, as that's what generates the hardware.ini file you'll need to edit in order to set the right resolution. Take my word for it, don't Google where it is like a fucking idiot. It's also recommended that you lock your frames per second somewhere between 50 and 59 FPS, as going any higher will cause audio to desync during cutscenes, among other interesting quirks. I've also heard people report that apparently a higher FPS can cause the game's physics engine to crash out, turning small drops into lethal falls, which, while I will admit is pretty funny, is not good because it makes the game unplayable. You could also take the time to install a HD texture or reshade mod, but in my opinion, it's unnecessary. The game doesn't look that bad, and sure, while some textures can look painfully outdated,
My brain go awooga.
the clever use of lighting makes everything look, nice and pretty. Lastly, as for what's the best way to actually play the game, it's on a gamepad, alright? Trust me, just spend the time configuring the controls and thank me later, alright? Look, it is possible to play this game on a mouse and keyboard if you really want to, or just hate yourself, but if that's the case, I'm gonna have to ask you to take that shit elsewhere, man. I can't condone that kind of behavior here on the channel. Now, I could take the time to complain about how shitty it is that they sell a game like this in the state that it's in, but at the end of the day, it's Ubisoft after all. What did you expect? Right? And look, if you don't want to play a game that doesn't run on modern systems right out of the box, you don't want to do any rooting around to get it working, which is completely understandable. One, you're lazy. Two, there's only one other alternative. And I would just hate to advocate for anything, any alternative whatsoever that could possibly detract from the value of multi-million-dollar corporations that see us as nothing more than economic units to exploit. I would just hate to do that. I just couldn't consider myself that kind of person. Yeah, not even 10 minutes in and there goes my chance at corporate sponsorships. Damn. Yes, sir. No corporate kickbacks for me. Damn. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, all that's left is to start the game for real and get this show on the road. As soon as we select to start the game, we transition over the tree line to a wonderful moonlit balcony where we're immediately given control of the prince. The game gives us a quick tutorial on how to move around, and after we stop acting like a spastic, we are greeted with this iconic opening.
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction. But I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you, they are wrong. Time is an ocean in a storm. You may wonder who I am and why I say this. Sit down and I will tell you a tale like none that you have ever heard. Know first that I am the son of Shoutout, a mighty king of Persia. On our way to Azad with a small company of men, we passed through India, where the promise of honor and glory tempted my father into a grievous error.
No, my son.
Your Majesty, I trust you will remember your promise. The Maharaja's treasure vaults lie within.
See how he fights. Like a warrior, son.
I don't think I can put the words together to accurately describe just how well this game sets up its opening premise, right? Who is the prince talking to? Why is he running through the jungle? Who's the baddie? What the fuck is this guy going on about? There's so many questions, but not enough time, because we're thrown immediately into the fray. This is when we get access to the game proper, and our first taste of the platforming. We start off small with some basic moves, jumping over gaps, shifting across ledges, running horizontally along a wall. You know, the usual. The prince is capable of just about any kind of maneuver you can think of. Kind of like Assassin's Creed, but a little bit more fantastical. Some moves come across as pretty achievable if, I just did a little bit more stretching, but I don't want to hurt myself. Either way, for now, it's just simple movement across the palace as the battle rages on below. What's interesting about this opening segment is that we've received periodic narration from the prince himself. Now, whenever you watch a video about this game, you'll hear people mention this and sing its praises because honestly, it's hard not to. It's just such a cool concept. The whole game is framed as the prince recounting a story. He's speaking after the fact, acknowledging how he was in that moment. And it does such a great job at instilling a sense of mystery because again, who the fuck is this guy talking to? But it doesn't just stop there. When you want to save the game, he'll ask you, are you sure?
Shall I continue my story from here the next time we're interrupted?
And when you do save the game, he'll say, I'm gonna start the story from here next time.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
And if the prince dies, he'll wave it away as if it was a mistake.
Wait. That's not how it happened.
As you do when you're retelling a story and mistakenly mention that you died partway through. Anyway, all of this to say is that it really does give you the vibe that this is an old school fantasy adventure with a young, naive protagonist with a lot to learn about the world. And it's kind of like something you would see in the Arabian Nights, which was the inspiration for the series and I suppose by proxy the game itself. You know what else was an inspiration for the game? The original titles. Sounds kind of stupid saying that out loud, not gonna lie. For the handful of you that are old enough, do you remember what those were like? There was a real weight to the prince's movements that separated it from other platformers at the time where characters just responded instantly to your inputs. No, in the original games, you had to take the momentum of your movements into consideration unless you wanted to get turned into a kebab. And it's the same case here. Well, that's not always the case, but we're not there just yet. You'll also get your first taste of the game's combat, and if you only do what it tells you to do, all you've got is your block, dodge, and basic sword attacks. At this stage, we'll only be dealing with basic enemies that are susceptible to a well-timed strike or constant barrage of attacks. The fights in the prelude are designed to teach you to be aware of your surroundings, be prepared to engage multiple enemies at once, and look for opportunities to attack whenever you can. Yeah, so since these guys are just peasants trying to defend their home against well-trained foreign invaders, they just get wasted. While you play this game, you'll undoubtedly notice the fluidity of the prince's movement. Everything just looks so smooth. The animations portray a real sense of movement. You can almost feel the way the prince moves his weight around. It's just so fucking crisp. The developers claim that there's around 750 animations dedicated solely to the prince's movement. And you know what? I believe it. So after some almost believable parkour and the slaughter of people too poor to afford a decent shirt, we finally make it to the treasure vaults. As we journey deeper, we stumble across the object for which will grant us honor and glory. the Dagger of Time,
as opposed to contributing to and distinguishing oneself in the ongoing battle.
The dagger's a nifty looking thing, but it's just out of reach. So we're going to have to find another way around. We can also find another relic here, the Hourglass of Time. But as the prince correctly puts it, although we may be strong enough to defy gravity, this thing ain't going nowhere. Finding an alternative route to the dagger not only tests our knowledge of the basic platforming, it also begins to play with the idea of adding traps into the mix, adding another layer to the gameplay. However, the ultimate test of whether or not we'll leave here with our prize is a series of vertical leaps upside a Hindu statue.
I will admit this was one of 2 sections in the entire game that I was completely unable to surpass as a small child. Even though the game does make this very clear, the simple instructions were just too hard for me to comprehend, so I was stuck on this for quite a while. But that's okay, I've grown past that because with time comes learning. With learning, understanding. With understanding,
ascension. And that's exactly where we're going as we finally make it to the top and claim the dagger.
Sand.
Now, astute viewers may have been able to figure out an item, someone called the Dagger of Time, might in fact possess some form of power, and that it does, as it now allows us to essentially fuck with the space-time continuum. Using the dagger, we can rewind time for up to 10 seconds. Each rewind will cost us a sand tank, and while we currently don't have a way to refill any that we use, thankfully the platforming is still pretty basic, so we should be okay. But now is not the time for pondering the mysteries of the universe. The vault does not like being raided, so lest it become our tomb, it's time to get the fuck out of Dodge. We do a little backtracking for an opening that in no way gets abused by speedrunners and reunite with Daddy Dearest.
Father, I have brought us honor and glory.
Your Majesty, you promised me my choice of the Maharaja's treasures. That dagger.
Surely you won't deny the lad a souvenir of his first battle. You may have your choice of all the Maharaja's other treasures. Except that hourglass. That will make a fine gift for the Sultan of Azad when we pass through his city. And some exotic animals for his menagerie. And a dozen slave girls. Yes, that should be enough. I want no animals or maidens harmed until I have chosen. Let it be known, King Sharaman is merciful in victory.
After the detour in India, the Persian army travels toward its true destination, the kingdom of Azad. The vizier even comes along as well, and though narrator Prince is able to recognize that it's a bad idea to take someone into your service with a known history of betrayal, Daddy thinks otherwise. Traveling across the sands with our booty in tow, we eventually arrive to a warm reception by our host, the Sultan. Shahraman shares the spoils of war and even gives him the hourglass. But just as everything seems all jolly and well, that's when the serpent strikes.
The sand. Why does it glow? I can tell you. Inside the hourglass is a marvel that no living man has seen. Alas, only the dagger can unlock the sands of time, and it belongs to a greater one than I. A young prince, dearer to his father than all the wealth of India. Perhaps he will oblige.
No! No! Stop!
Is it meant to do this? Alicia Sigata! time. I can undo what you have done. Give it to me.
Due to opening the hourglass, the palace begins to crumble, and because the vizier has a black lung and a bum leg, the prince is able to get away. But that doesn't mean respite for our hero just yet. Whilst some survivors and that girl that keeps showing up are able to make a run for it, we've got a new problem to deal with. Sand creatures. And they do look a step above Tier 1 Indian infantry. We're not in Persia anymore, Toto.
Once again, as the story is elevated to the next level, so is the gameplay.
Aside from giving us the powers of a god, the dagger is the only means for actually destroying the sand monsters. As we whittle them down, we can eventually bring them to the floor and absorb the sand directly into the dagger, both refilling it and making it slightly stronger. When we go for the final kill on an enemy, we need to make sure that we're safe to do so, as we need time to finish them off. I'm not sure if I should be pausing here or not. So begins a delicate balance of maintaining a consistent offensive against seemingly unending hordes of sand creatures, looking for opportunities to finish them off whenever we can. Yeah, I really gotta find another way to reword this shit, man. Fuck.
Now, if this is too much for you to take in at once, don't worry. The mysterious baddie in the background is there to yell at you in case you get lost.
Like with the dagger. Keep the sand.
Once the sand creatures are dispatched, something interesting happens.
The sand pulls around a vortex of light.
Now, you might think that after nearly getting crushed under the weight of your average American, or getting duped into starting the apocalypse, our boy here would be just a little bit more cautious of certain things going forward, in particular matters for which he might have very limited knowledge of. But that would mean that we're going somewhere.
The prince takes the opportunity to dive right into that shit. Upon touching the sands, the prince is granted visions of the future, showcasing events to come and giving us hints on how to proceed. The vortexes will now be a staple of the game going forward, appearing after every fight, granting us a cryptic vision and providing an opportunity to save the game. When the prince eventually comes to, he sets off in seemingly the only direction that seems to make sense, after the slave girl that seems to know so much. As we try to reach the girl, we're blocked off by the palace collapsing and are forced to find another way around.
Yeah, get used to that. It'll happen a lot.
For now, we deal with some basic platforming and combat encounters to help us get used to the slowly forming gameplay loop.
This might be the best time to start talking about the camera. The Sands of Time uses a variety of camera angles, depending on what situation you're in.
When you're generally running around or in combat, it'll be over the shoulder. When you're entering certain sections of a room, the camera angle will forcefully shift to orient you towards where you should focus. At times, this can be a bit confusing, but thankfully, aside from the visions and intuitive clues in the world design, you can also switch to a first person or landscape view to help find your way. First person works how you would expect, and you can use this to help gauge whether or not you can make certain jumps, reach areas with your wall running, or even identify poles or ledges for you to grab onto. But if you're looking for something just a little bit more broad, there's the landscape camera. Aside from giving you a nice cinematic view of the specially curated architecture, it does go a long way to help guide where you should be going.
But you can also just use them if you think they make the game look cooler, which they do. Yeah, so there's no denying that the camera isn't perfect.
The game's not running on tank controls, so you can move the prince and camera independently, but it's often prone to yanking itself to certain angles very abruptly, changing the perspective. This can then cause you to keep shifting around like an idiot and basically fight the camera for no good reason.
Having played this game dozens of times, I guess I'm just kind of used to it. And although I do understand why some people have issues with the camera control, I really don't think it's that much of a problem. There's only one egregious example where the camera control is absolutely atrocious. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Or, breaks.
Another benefit of learning how to use the camera is to help find the game's collectibles. Scattered throughout the palace are sand clouds and magical water fountains. Sand clouds are big glowing collections of sand that emit a really fucking annoying noise just to make the locations even more obvious. For every 8 of these we collect, we unlock a new sand tank. The magic fountains, on the other hand, are a little different. First off, the location isn't as obvious as the sand clouds. We need to look for these stone hallways. They're usually slightly off the beaten path, but also kind of hidden in plain sight, if that makes sense. Entering them will lead us to a sprawling cavern filled with bridges, and at its center, a magical fountain filled with water that the prince will immediately drink from and begin to trip balls.
Are you getting it yet? This guy does not fucking learn.
Oh, and he doesn't discriminate. He'll drink water from whatever source he can because that's how you get your health back. Look, I could understand drinking the sewer water, but the Persia girl bath water? Are you serious? Dude, how down bad could you possibly be?
Don't answer that question.
Anyway, drinking from these increases our maximum health, and that's always nice to have. So, after chasing the lady in red for a little bit, we finally catch up to her. And by that I mean she pulls us aside into an empty room for a little bit of, you know.
To scold us for unleashing the apocalypse. What the fuck did you think was gonna happen? You know, I reckon you're the kind of schmuck that the Baldur's Gate romances were written for.
It turns out her name is Farah. She's got a bit of beef with us, on account of being the Maharaja's daughter.
Oh my god!
You know, the guy whose palace we sacked for shits and giggles.
Anyway, she reckons that if we give her the dagger, she can fix what we've done. The prince actually shows a bit of skepticism here for once and reckons Farah is full of shit. The camera also goes to great lengths to focus on her poorly rendered necklace. I believe this is meant to highlight that this is providing her protection from the sands, further hinting that she is knowledgeable about the nature of the hourglass.
But it could also just be the prince getting a good look at the treasure daddy brought back from India. You know, passions are running pretty high in this scene.
Alas, the conversation is cut short by the introduction of sand scarabs, showing that the sands of time are an equal opportunity calamity. Farah and the prince make a plan to rendezvous back at the reception hall, and the prince covers her escape, showing that he's not a complete twat. Once the scarabs are dealt with, we scale down the largest bedroom known to man, and using the ever helpful sand visions, discover a hidden passageway to the palace's defense system. Here we meet a palace guard who hasn't yet been affected by the sands, and I can understand why, since his power extends beyond the confines of the game itself, as he is fully capable of blowing out your fucking eardrums.
Oh, thank God! I was afraid you were one of them!
Yeah, you know what? To be fair, I suppose I too would prefer tinnitus as opposed to magical dysentery.
Not considering, even for a moment, how it could affect him in the future, the prince decides to help the guard activate the palace's defense system with a little bit of problem solving.
Now, this can be a little confusing, but don't worry. The guard is there to guide you through it.
Careful! Think ahead!
And he'll even congratulate you when you finally solve the puzzle. What a nice guy.
That's it! I knew you could do it!
The celebration doesn't last long, however, as the script doesn't have room for another character, and so, after exhausting his usefulness to the plot, the guard is quickly consumed by the sands. Now, if you guys questioned the integrity of activating a defense system that was most likely not designed to defend against what's currently posing the largest threat to the palace, you're a step above our boy here with room temperature IQ, as he now very quickly comes to understand what he has done.
Before in the Maharaja's treasure vaults, we were just flirting with the idea of traps. But now, we've met them at the bar, invited them back to the apartment, and they're not leaving anytime soon.
Once again, we have added another layer to the gameplay. I swear, this thing's like a fucking onion, man. Before, it was easy enough to navigate the crumbling palace, but now we've got to manage all the conveniently placed traps. Like, these things are bloody everywhere. Like, who even fucking decides to put one here? Like, what even is that, man? The traps themselves are all very basic, and it's easy to understand how to get past them. Ignore the spiky poles, don't run into the saw blades, and don't step on the spike traps. You know, you guys are smart. You get the idea.
But it's the way that it combines with the platforming that elevates it to another level. Now, I'm sure when most of you think of platformers, you probably picture a children's game that mentally unstable man-children try to pass off as being the peak of game design. But I can assure you, anything is enjoyable when it is designed this well. But that's not all we're adding to the gameplay. The last few sand visions have started to give us hints on some new moves that we can pull out during combat.
We can vault over enemies the same way you jump over adult responsibility, and even use the walls to our advantage to circumvent an enemy's guard. By now, we've fought a few different types of sand monsters, and while some are pushovers, some are a little more crafty. What works on one enemy won't necessarily work on another, so each becomes a little puzzle to solve. Sure, we can just pound them down, but recoiling from a blocked attack only to get ganked by the rest of them that are waiting to just kick your ass is a surefire way to burn through all of your rewinds and then have to reload a previous save.
See, isn't that just so nice that we got a tool that just lets us experiment, be a bit reckless, and if we fuck up, we can just roll it back. It's just such a cool feature, I wonder if there's a link to the narrative anyway.
Speaking of the dagger, it can be used in combat for more than just sucking the sand monsters. This old chestnut. It's got a couple of other neat tricks as well. First off, you can use it to freeze enemies for a brief period, with which we can then follow up with an attack to finish them off instantly. Sure, we don't get any sands if we do this, but trust me, there's plenty more where that came from. We can also use a slowdown feature to help bring down the pace, giving us a better opportunity to react on the battlefield or help time our platforming. Eventually, we do make it back to the reception hall, and just in case you guys forgot, actions have consequences.
This here's got to be one of my favourite segments of the game from a narrative perspective. First off, you've got Farah, and although she seems like the stereotypical damsel in distress, that couldn't be any further from the truth.
Farah is a capable combatant, sometimes.
Ow!
She's handy with a bow and able to keep some enemies at bay while providing covering fire for the prince. She's also really good at drawing aggro, creating opportunities for us to attack distracted enemies. The downside, however, is that she's not able to finish enemies off and could potentially be overwhelmed and killed if we don't peel for her. If her health bar appearing on the side of the screen doesn't make it obvious, her death will result in a game over, so do try your best to look after her. Meanwhile, assuming you're not completely colorblind, some of the enemies here are a different color than the other guards we fought previously. This is an intentional detail left by the developers to signal that this is a different type of enemy. The blue ones are immune to being vaulted over and can even counter your attacks if you're not being careful. Lastly, there's the Sand King. He's one of the only bosses in the game, so he's no slouch. Of course, you'll find this out the hard way, since he's capable of blocking every attack you throw his way. Now, I'm not going to spoil how to beat him here because you know what, I have faith in you guys. I believe you can figure it out. The fight with the Sand King isn't an important battle because it's the game's best attempt at trying to make combat interesting. It's more so what it represents from a narrative standpoint.
You see, up until now, the prince hasn't suffered a great deal as a result of his actions, and he's practically got through all of his scot-free. It was his position as prince that gave him the means and the capability to survive the battle at the Maharaja's palace, and practically avoid the battle entirely.
Pussy!
But it's also because the prince had the dagger that he was able to survive unleashing the sands, and actually had a means to defend himself. But now, the prince is face to face with the sum total of his reckless abandon.
The prince is now face to face with what's left of the man that he so clearly aspired to, that he tried to win the adulation of, but just like the shifting sands on the desert dunes, what was once a powerful and mighty king has been erased, only to be reduced to a horrid, mindless creature incapable of recognizing the son he held in love and joy.
Alright, that's enough pretentious shit. You guys understand what I'm trying to say, and this ain't fucking English class. Let's get back to the fighting.
Following the battle with the Sand King, the prince nurses a small wound and takes the opportunity to remove some of the clothing blocking the Adonis hidden underneath.
Farah genuinely tries to comfort the prince here, but he's quick to shut it down. Coping, if you will.
Anyway, he runs straight into the sand vortex because it's a more effective means of dealing with the pain instead of confronting his problems. Imagine that. After another sand trip, the prince awakes to Farah attempting to pick up the dagger. The prince doesn't take this kindly and is pretty hostile in response. Farah again tries talking sense into the prince, but he's not having it. It's only when she stresses that the world is truly at stake and spits some random shit about him being a good person that the prince is willing to cooperate and share what he knows. Earlier, we saw a sand creature air delivery service take the hourglass to the Tower of Dawn. and reluctantly, the prince offers for Farah to join him in his quest. Not being one to mince words, she immediately stands on business and heads off, with the prince trailing after her.
I would go as far to say that he's not just literally trailing after her here. I wonder if she'll be a good influence on him.
After leaving through an opening in the reception hall, we're once again given control of the prince on the outside of the palace. But this time, we've got ourselves a companion. Farah will now be journeying with the prince for the remainder of the game. I mentioned before how she's a capable companion, but her importance isn't just narrative, it's legitimate. The puzzles you'll face now require her input to succeed. The prince literally cannot complete his journey without her. It's also from this point onwards that the core gameplay loop has all of its elements. You'll platform, dodge traps, keep an eye out for collectibles, solve puzzles with Farah, and when that's done, you'll finish off with a combat encounter. The gameplay loop is very well designed. You'll always be doing something to keep you interested. Even when you don't think you're doing anything, you'll be given exposition from narrator prince, or enjoy the slowly forming relationship between the prince and Farah.
Stop staring at me.
I wasn't looking at you.
It might seem a little overwhelming to have such little downtime, but there's always the right amount of a certain gameplay element to keep you feeling engaged.
You know, it's kind of like that seamless experience shit that modern AAA adventure games love to use as a marketing point. None of it's new, man. They were doing it 20 years ago.
It's also around this time we'll unlock the ultimate ability with the dagger, Mega Freeze. Once we absorb enough enemies and all sand and power tanks are filled, we can go Goblin mode and smite everything with impunity. I'm not gonna lie, the ability is pretty OP when it's not glitching out and you're almost hamstringing yourself by gaining additional sand tanks, but I think that's the game's way of trying to keep things balanced. Well, it gets points for trying at the very least.
The biggest problem here is gonna be the geometry, but get used to it because it's gonna be a consistent problem throughout the rest of our journey. The palace really opens up after this point, and we journey through a bunch of different locations like a storehouse, a menagerie, and even a bathhouse. In case this wasn't made apparent earlier, the level and world design is just top notch. Sure, the way some parts of the game are designed really does break your immersion and remind you that yes, you are in fact playing a video game. But that's the exception rather than the rule. When you play this game, you'll come to admire the Islamic architecture and how that architecture melds together seamlessly with the platforming in a grounded realism, and how combined it all sells the idea that you're exploring through a crumbling palace. So when I say come to admire, I really mean come to the realization that it looks cool as shit. And let's be honest, it's better than smearing fucking yellow paint all over the place.
But the variety doesn't stop there. As you explore new areas, you'll see different compositions of sand creatures blocking your path. Sand vultures in a menagerie, gimp slaves and OnlyFans models in the baths. The use of enemy placement not only provides a different challenge to overcome in each new area you visit, but it also adds to the environmental storytelling. Not in a let's use abstract assets and let people make hour-long videos explaining the narrative significance of the cut chair placement kind of way,
but a more natural and understandable way. You know what I mean? Our journey is going to take us through a bunch of lovely places, like some ancient ruins and the guards' barracks. But if the sights aren't enough for you, you also get to bear witness to the prince's El Riz.
Thanks.
Don't mention it.
and him looking for just about any excuse to take his clothes off.
Getting us ever closer to that sexy macho man front cover look. Oh yeah.
We eventually arrive at the ruined outskirts of the palace, and in a seemingly out-of-place segment, the prince has Farah rush on ahead toward an unusually large bridge, almost as if it's meant to house some form of boss fight.
But alas, due to constraints of all sorts, we just end up fighting some birds instead.
The magnitude of such an epic battle causes the bridge to collapse, and while Farah is able to find a path forward, the prince is unable to join her.
Because he's just such a swole blood orange. Alright, cut me some slack, alright? I'm running out of jokes, okay?
They're now separated, and make a plan to reunite at the baths. Not the peasant baths we visited earlier, no, the Sultan's personal baths, for his harem.
Throughout the journey thus far, Farah has been a enlightening and humbling force upon the prince, almost tempering that impetuous attitude that we've come to loathe. But the minute, and I do mean the minute, he is left to his own devices, he immediately reverts to his old self, talking about how he needs to get her to toe the line and act like a real man. And I mean, like, hey, buddy, a little bit of advice for you. If you're gonna start getting a woman to toe the line, you were never really man enough in the first place. Now, some of you may be sharp enough to realize that I mentioned that Farah will be journeying with us for the rest of our journey, and as it turns out, I've lied to you. This was a calculated measure as a way to start some controversy and to drive engagement. You see, because I'm too small to justify a Sunny V2 video, I needed a way to really get people's attention, and this was the best I can think of. I mean, it was either that or message a minor, you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say in a long, roundabout way is thank you to everybody who's watched the videos thus far, and thank you for subscribing. We've got 200 subscribers, and I mean, I don't really know if that's a big milestone these days or if it's one at all or anyone really gives a fuck, but I'm thankful, and this is my way of saying thank you. Now, because I don't want to make things weird, let's just get back to the video, okay? Although the prince refuses to admit it based on his outward dialogue, he's begun to develop feelings for Farah, which, you know, if you ask me, completely understandable. Don't blame him. Sure, he appreciates her company in what's understandably trying times, but it looks as though it's developing beyond that. Of course, this is all buried under a heavy layer of sass, which, if you also ask me, is paradoxical and unbecoming of a man who's not gonna let a woman walk all over him. The naivety of youth, buddy, we've all been there. Naturally, the speed at which this relationship has progressed from adverse hostility to casual flirting, and now even something potentially beyond that, that is if Farah can be believed, has been criticized. Now, while I understand those criticisms, I do also know that when passions run hot and people aren't thinking straight, they look for just about any excuse for release. You know, desperate times call for desperate measures, if you will. And if the world truly is doomed, we gotta repopulate it somehow, baby. But I mean, come on, if there's a real reason for why this is, you know, logical, if I could just, you know, have your attention for a moment, if there's a real reason why, it's because how else would we ever explain you getting laid for the first time?
So after some deep, introspective reflection in dark, dank caverns, sewers with perfectly suitable drinking water, and what is possibly the worst section in the entire game, which involves fending off flying enemies while platforming under pressure, the prince is able to reunite with Farah in the rich kid baths. And we arrive just in time, as Farah is being swarmed by sand creatures, forcing us to navigate the unreasonably complex layer of the baths in an attempt to rescue her. After a tense, close quarters fight, battling both Persia bath girls and the geometry alike, we are greeted to this scene after saving at the sand vortex.
Next time. Leave me. My love. Please don't leave me.
What did you call me?
It doesn't matter. The important thing is, I know how we can reach the Tower of Dawn.
Of course, the hourglass. All right. But this time, stay with me and pay attention. Can't spend all day chasing after you.
Oh, well, you two get a fucking room. Get a load of this chick.
Naturally, the prince is pretty confused at this development, and I imagine a fair few of you are starting to get emotional whiplash because I swear it was only 5 minutes ago that they were ready to kill each other, but fuck it. Here we are, I guess. Farah, on the other hand, is quite literally happy to drop this at a moment's notice and disregard the entire incident, being all emotionally detached and all that, which, speaking from experience, is pretty painful, but, you know, we take it as it comes.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
If the prince's little display of snarkiness earlier wasn't enough, don't worry. He's more than happy to employ it again during the game's next segment, which, in my humble opinion, is its best: the library.
This is undoubtedly one of the game's finer moments, and you know what? From here on out, it's just straight banger after banger.
The library essentially serves as one gigantic puzzle, forcing us to ascend its heights and redirect beams of light to open a gate, which has a switch, opening another gate. You do get a pretty good sword at the end of it though. Have I mentioned that you get periodic sword upgrades throughout the game? This one's called the Sword of the Avenging Warrior. Yeah, that poorly textured inscription on the blade actually means something. The sword upgrades we've got so far don't do any extra damage, but they do let us break down walls and doors, which is pretty cool.
But I guess they provide you a sense of pride and accomplishment. No? Gonna go slightly off topic here, and this goes out to anyone with the capability to actually do anything, but come on, this is what the people want to see, bro. Cool swords, people to protect, and a world to save, alright? It's been a winning formula for fucking centuries, but for some reason, nowadays it's different. Everyone wants to mess with it. They think all of a sudden that's changed, and I don't understand that.
Anyway, what makes this section iconic is the banter. The bickering between the prince and Farah as if they're both in an unnecessary situationship of their own making is just absolutely peak. It couldn't be any more relevant.
Listen to this. Of what use is reason against the power of love? Love is life. So if you want to live, die in love. Die in love if you want to stay alive.
What's that supposed to mean?
I thought you'd like it.
If you want to be useful, try finding a book that'll tell us how to get out of here.
This isn't that kind of game.
Game? She thinks this is a game.
The next section leads to the observatory tower.
And just hold on a moment. We're going to wait for the astrology girlies to decipher this for us. Sorry, what? This is all astronomy. And it's legitimate. Yikes.
And we're then treated to another set of ramblings of the prince trying to decipher the intricacies of another human being potentially having romantic feelings for him.
After all, she is a Maharaja's daughter. A conquered one, but still. Her blood is royal. Besides, what better way to tame her insolence? It's not so bad for a woman to have a little spirit. It's a challenge.
Fuck, man, this guy really is clueless.
It's not long before we're practically at the foot of the Tower of Dawn. And just as we're about to enter the courtyard leading to its entrance, this happens.
Prison. In my father's palace was a prison much like this. I had never set foot inside. Now here I was, myself a prisoner, seeking an escape.
Now, while I think this segment would be better served if the prince was at his lowest point, there's no denying that it's still a fat W.
The prison has got to be one of the most well-designed areas of the game. It's got plenty of wall running, more interesting ways of blending combat and the platforming together, and most importantly, meaningful reflections from our protagonist to remind you not to act like a fucking retard.
You know, before I had access to the game proper, this was one of the segments they used to let you play in one of those old school game demos. You know, the ones you used to get in the magazines and shit? Oh man, those were the days, you know? Imagine actually giving someone the opportunity to play a game before they buy it. Nah, nowadays it's multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns with hyper-tuned advertisements. Like, fuck off, bro.
But that's not all we're treated to. The wait is finally over. The shirt's off, baby. Check it out. While the whole situation that leads up to this moment in the prisons is contrived at best and lazy at worst, it's an important segment as it goes a long way to showcase the prince's character development. In a rare display of maturity, he acknowledges his naivete, having been sheltered from the dark aspects of rulership such as torture chambers and seemingly endless river of blood likely hidden beneath the glory of Babylon. I mean, if he was based, he might have touched on economic policy, but that's just me. He reflects on how the people that once resided here, innocent or guilty alike, have been made equal by the sands of time. He even concludes that he truly does love Farah and proclaims that he will marry her. I guess you could say him taking off his shirt was more than just literal, huh? Now I hope you guys are sitting down for this next part because I'm about to flex muscles that haven't been used since my year 9 English class. The outfit the prince wears when we first meet him, what does it symbolize? A rash? Entitled brat? Well, throughout the journey thus far, it's been removed, piece by piece. It's almost as though the trials he's faced and the temperance of his companion and now potential lover Farah have helped to strip away some of those undesirable elements that got him in this mess to begin with. Obviously, he's still got some clothing on because, you can't run around naked, even though I'm sure some of you would like that. But I also think it's meant to mean that he's not a changed man just yet. You don't just change overnight. And although he's still got a bit of a ways to go, he's made progress at the very least. So kudos.
And though it finally seems as though the prince has begun to wall run in the right direction, something sinister has begun to brew in the background. The last few Sand Vortex visions have shown us visions of Farah, but of Farah making a play for the dagger. Now, if there's one thing we can know for certain is that these visions are pretty accurate. We've relied on them in the past and they haven't let us down. So what does that mean when they're concerning the actions of others? I mean, when you stop and think about it, Farah's already made a play for the dagger. Who's not to say she won't try again? Are her motives even genuine? Furthermore, the Vizier, the only other person close to Farah, he's tricked us. What's not to say that she's taken a page out of his book? I hate to say it, but maybe the prince is right. Maybe she can't be trusted. And so, with this in mind, the prince escapes the prisons and reunites with Farah to begin the final stretch to the Tower of Dawn.
Once we climb our way out of the prison, we're immediately pulled into a fight against some of the toughest enemies in the game, and a fair few of them as well, mind you, in order to protect little old Farah.
Old Farah, the trouble magnet, huh?
The fights from here on out will be the hardest the game has to throw at us, and that makes sense since we're kinda close to the hourglass. You'd expect it to be a bit tough, or at least that's what the Sand Vortex visions tell us, but as I mentioned previously, they're still showing Farah acting a little sus, to say the least. After activating the next Sand Vortex, the prince awakens to being cradled by Farah, and before she has a moment to comment on how Persian boys are just built differently, the prince goes schizo mode and immediately moves to protect the dagger. Farah by now is used to the prince disassociating and tries her best to comfort him. And it's moments like this that make it hard to tell. Can the visions truly be believed? The way Farah's acting, it seems so genuine. But the visions, what do they mean? What do they mean, Prince? However, now is not the time to get caught up in things like existential or personal crises. We are approaching the end of our journey. All we need to do is lock in and get this flatbread. We can't afford to doubt ourselves or get distracted. Least of all, fall victim to doubt and suspicion. As it turns out, the Tower of Dawn is really just one big, elaborate elevator that leads to where the Vizier has stored the hourglass.
The Sultan's treasure vault, because treasure vaults were all the rage back in 9 AD, I guess.
And to the surprise of absolutely fucking nobody, the very spacious elevator that ascends to an unspecified height will in fact be the placement for our final battle with the sword and dagger we've grown so accustomed to. We're fighting nothing but a seemingly endless amount of the most elite enemies, and though the elevator is spacious, it's a rough, close quarters fight, which means Farah's gonna need protection and the camera is gonna be a pain in the ass to work with. But this fight here isn't just a peak of the game's combat where you need to use every trick in the book to succeed.
This is where the music is at its fucking best. If this doesn't want to make you fight until the sand runs red with blood, I don't know what will. Shit, I don't even have to explain this to you. You've got eyes, but if you're blind, here, this is for you. And if you don't got ears, well, good luck.
Where are they coming from?
Once the last sand creature has been sucked, the elevator finally makes it to the top. And there it is, the hourglass. All that's left is to climb on it, then fall.
dagger. Strike it into the center of the dome.
My father's army sacked your palace, captured you as a slave.
What?
You have every reason to hate me.
What are you talking about?
Now you want me to trust you.
Go on. There's no time.
Give me the dagger.
The dagger! He must not get the dagger!
I had faced my enemy. I had looked into his eyes, and I had lost everything.
At the moment that was meant to secure victory, the prince falls victim to doubt. This is supposed to be the moment when our hero triumphs over evil. Yet despite having bested all the challenges laid before him, he fails at seemingly the most simple task of all.
To trust in someone who loves you.
A tomb.
You were there. The dagger was in your hand. Why did you hesitate? You think you're cleverer than everybody, but you're just like the rest of them. Those soldiers, all they can do is fight, destroy. Why did I trust you? Why didn't you trust me?
I'm not exactly sure what this phenomenon is called when the hero fails at seemingly the most vital part of the story. But the most mainstream example I can think of is Frodo at the fires of Mount Doom. As most of you would and should be aware, after a long and arduous journey resisting the temptations of the ring, for the most part, Frodo fails at the foot of the fires of Mount Doom. At the last possible moment, he fails. And what I love about these moments is how human they feel. Think about your own lives. How many times have we worked toward a project, a big game, a goal, putting blood, sweat, tears, countless hours, obsessing over it, putting our energy, our soul into it, only to fail, only for it to not go the way we planned? I can't think of anything more human than to try to achieve something and then to fail. And I don't enjoy these moments because, I love misery. I love watching people in agony. Okay? No, I love these moments because they precede the mean as fuck comeback you know is coming next.
Ow.
Sorry.
Where are you?
I'm right here.
Hold my hand. Don't let go. I didn't mean what I said.
No, you're right. All that's happened is my doing. I wanted honor and glory. I brought this on us.
You are brave and good. If this tomb is to be ours, at least the dagger will be buried with us. And we are together. What is it?
Nothing.
You're trembling.
I just don't like close spaces. There must be some way out of here.
When I was small, my mother taught me a secret word. She said that when I was afraid, all I had to do was speak that word, and a magic door would open.
Although the entirety of this scene takes place in a pitch black background where there's literally nothing to look at except for dust, you have to appreciate that we get basically 5 minutes of non-stop S-tier character development. In the darkness of the cave, the prince gets all in touch with his feelings and realizes, becomes fully cognizant of the fact that his pride, his arrogance, has cost him everything. It's doomed the world, cost him his life, and potentially, and worst of all, the love of the woman he cares for. Farah rightfully scolds the prince, justified in her anger, but ever the mature one, she recognizes his pain. And what does she do? She comforts him and tells him a story.
To which the prince is quick to respond with,
I've never told that to anybody.
I can see why. It's the most childish thing I've ever heard of.
Oh, this fucking guy. But then, something unexpected happens.
What was the word?
Kakolukiam.
Kakolukiam. You did that, didn't you? Farah?
in a move that is borderline Deus Ex Machina, Farah opens up a tomb that leads to the stone hallways that resemble the ones that lead to the magical water fountains. And at the end of the unreasonably long hallway, this, a huge, open, multi-storied room filled with heaps of doorways and at its center, a statue of Farah? What follows next is simultaneously my favorite and least favorite section of the game. I say least favorite because it involves a puzzle that I was completely unable to solve as a child. That took me years, literal years to figure out. Okay, I kid you not, I was convinced that the game was broken. And it was the second point in the game that I considered a massive roadblock that I couldn't get past, all right? You have no idea, all right? And you know what? I'm convinced some of you wouldn't be able to get it the first time either, right? And if you're going to be a smartass that tells me, oh, this is actually really easy, all you had to do was this, go fuck yourself. And I'm not spoiling the answer for you either. So, you know, just play the game for yourself.
And as for why it's one of my favorites, it's because it took me 15 years to realize that it's a big fuck off euphemism for what happens next.
It's beautiful. Come on.
I've been really trying, baby. Anyway, what makes this scene funny is if you consider the previous segment of players fumbling their way through the previous puzzle, and how that resembles clapping cheeks for the first time, and how that mirrors the prince's own inexperience. And I mean, you know, he jumps in a pool with a naked princess with his fucking pantalones on, so, you know. Yeah, I mean, you know, it reminds me of my first time, and I know I look back on it with extreme shame and embarrassment, and maybe you guys can relate to that, but that's just me. Anyway, let's stop talking about this. Stop acting like perverts, or is it just me acting like the pervert? Fuck, maybe I do deserve that Sonny V2 video.
Like all good things, it must eventually come to an end. And when the prince awakes from this wet and lovely dream, he's all alone. Farah is gone, and so is the dagger. Shit, the bitch pulled a fast one on us. The visions were right. It turns out, even our trusty sword is gone too. It's not all bad though. Farah left us her necklace, which at the very least means we won't get turned into a sand monster. But you know what we don't have protection against? Lacerations and blunt force trauma. Because as soon as we're given control of the prince, we're immediately bum rushed by sand creatures. And so begins a tense section where players have been stripped of their ability to defend themselves and now find themselves helpless against the foes we've spent the whole game shitting on. For at least 30 seconds. Because the minute we turn the corner, we come across this chamber here, holding the meanest sword that you'll ever see.
Conveniently, the sand creatures won't chase us, giving us plenty of time to solve the puzzle without the threat of death, assuming you're not dumb enough to touch the instant death force field. Our prize, the strongest sword in the game,
able to destroy obstacles and sand creatures in a single strike, even without the dagger. Its inscription, the Sword of the Enlightened Warrior. How ironic.
If getting swindled by a woman won't make a man wisen up, I don't know what will.
What follows next, however, is legitimately a tense segment, as the boon of such power is only there to offset the fact that we must now complete the most complex platforming section of the entire game without the dagger. Without our crutch.
By now, most players would have gotten used to the idea of being able to reverse any fuck-ups we make. But now, every movement must be precise. Every jump must land. Otherwise, gravity is going to do its thing. I really do enjoy these segments in games where they add or remove a certain aspect for the sake of a challenge, because it can really go a long way to make certain parts of games memorable. In this case, we've been stripped of the ability to use the dagger, but in exchange, are given a sword that can one-shot enemies. Naturally, this segment does get a fair bit of criticism. People say it's gimmicky, poorly designed. With the save points so fairly spread out, it's reminiscent of the boss runs from Dark Souls 1 as a comparison. And again, while I do understand these criticisms, I have to disagree, hard disagree. Why? Because think about it. This is the only logical evolution of the game's challenge. We're given the dagger within the first 30 minutes, and by now know exactly how to use it. But what we should also have a solid grasp on isn't the ledge that we're reaching for, it's on the prince's movement. We know all these moves, they're not throwing anything new at us. It's all psychological, it's all up here in the grey. And that's what I love about this segment. Furthermore, consider how throughout the entirety of the game, the narrative has worked in tandem with the gameplay. Think about the narrative significance of this moment. Would this segment mean as much as it does, or be important as it is, if we had the dagger? No, I didn't think so. And that's why this segment is the best part in the entire game. So after a little flipping and jumping that I'm sure by now has your palms a little sweaty, we finally catch a glimpse of Farah running past with all our gear. And I mean, come on, the fuck is she gonna do with that sword, man? That's as big as her.
She must be using a dagger. Farah, be careful! Don't use up all the sand!
We continue to chase Farah, and soon we're scaling the outside of the Tower of Dawn itself. All around us, it looks as though the world is ending, and if we fail to catch up to her in time, it could very well be the case. When we finally make it to the summit, to the top of the tower, we reunite with Farah. And this happens.
Farah! Farah, no!
What makes this scene so effective, such a gut punch, is the reality of it. We know on an instinctual level what falling from such a high place will do to you. We know subconsciously what falling does to a human being. What goes up must come down. Gravity is the bringer of death.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now. I'm just stroking my shit.
To quote Nietzsche, I pity the that act the fool.
Okay. This is a serious moment. Seriously though, how could I possibly put this into words to do it justice without inflating the view time any further? All I know is that we don't have time to mourn just yet, and that's fine because I really want to fucking swing at something first, alright? Bring it, pussy!
And you were worried about me keeping it. Your eyes, they're green.
You think you're cleverer than everybody, but you're just like the rest of them. Soldiers. All they do is fight, destroy. Why did I trust you?
Why didn't you trust me?
When the last sand creature is slain, we are granted our final sand vision. And it's almost as though it's mocking the prince this time. He's just lost the woman he loves. Been betrayed by said woman, but I digress. Lost his father. Been responsible for unleashing the apocalypse, all while simultaneously faltering at the single best opportunity to avert it. So what are we greeted with? A reminder of all the places we've journeyed and battled through. The palace is crumbling under the weight of horror the prince has unleashed, and it's empty. The world itself feels this way, as though all life has truly been expunged, been consumed by the sands. And for what? Honor? Glory? What is that even worth? They're meaningless, empty platitudes in a situation like this. It's like trying to hold sand between your fingers. However, the battle is not over yet. We still need to descend to the hourglass and finish what we started.
No. No.
The girl is unimportant. Give me the dagger, and I will give you power. Eternal life will be yours.
Live forever, and those I loved are dead and I to blame. I choose death.
And now it comes full circle. Using the power of the hourglass itself, the prince is able to perform the grand rewind, taking us all the way back to before the beginning of the game, dagger included. With the knowledge of what's to come, the prince races off through the jungle and leaves to meet the daughter of his enemy, the Maharaja of India.
Do not be afraid. This belongs to you.
The dagger of time. But it is locked away within my father's treasure vault. How?
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction. But I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you, they are wrong. Time is an ocean in a storm. You may wonder who I am and why I say this. Sit down, and I will tell you the tale like none that you have ever heard. No further. I am the sun, and that is why I have come. To warn you and your father to arrest this treacherous vizier before he betrays you and brings ruin on us all. His signal is a flaming arrow shot into the air. Prevent him, and my father's army will know the traitor has been unmasked. They will turn back.
A wild tale indeed. I have a simpler version. A Persian soldier, lusting for glory, entered the chambers of the Maharaja's daughter and was slain by me.
Oh, You didn't think this fuck was gonna get away without a little bit of old-fashioned revenge now, did you? So ensues the second boss battle of the entire game. An epic struggle between the treacherous vizier and the prince. He's very mistakenly wrong.
Your father was a great warrior in his youth, or so he would have the world believe. A pity his son does not take after him. And then again, perhaps father and son are alike. It would appear that both share a taste for easy plunder.
You waste your breath. What little you possess.
Did you really think you could defeat me?
Careful. Don't tire yourself.
And so it ends. How will the Maharaja feel when he finds his only daughter slain by the son of his enemy? Do you have any last words you wish me to communicate to the princess before I kill her? Words of love, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm gonna be real with you. It's a really shit boss fight. I wish I could dress it up to make it seem like it's better than what it actually is. But you know what? We've come this far, so let's just finish on a high note. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present to you the final, uninterrupted moments of gameplay for The Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time.
I could have been immortal.
Then it's true. He was a traitor.
Take this. Return it to your father's treasure vault. Guard it well.
I owe you thanks. But why did you invent such a fantastic story? Do you think me a child, that I would believe such nonsense? I said I owe you thanks. You presume too much. Such a fantastic story. Do you think me a child, that I would believe such nonsense?
You're right. It was just a story.
It's a little bittersweet, isn't it? You know, the prince even accepts this reality. He's suffered, corrected his mistakes, but it's cost him more than he could ever know. Sure, he gives it a shot, but in the end, things just had to be this way. The world that he knew and destroyed is gone, as is the woman he grew to love. And so, the prince departs with a clever little callback. No longer the impudent man-child we knew in the beginning, but perhaps more like a prince. A true Prince of Persia. You know what to do. Alright, anyway, enough. Let's wrap this shit up. Let's do it.
Wait. I don't even know your name.
Just call me Kakulukia.
Alright, now I want to finish by summarizing the story a little bit. And I'm sure some of you are probably going, buddy, you've been talking about it for ages. What are you going on about? And you know what? I have. And I fucking can if I want to, because honestly, I think it's that good.
The first thing that anybody can appreciate about this story is how simplistic and concise it is in nature. There's no fluffing about. It's a real lean, mean storytelling machine. It's got a very clear beginning, middle, and end. The ending, by the way, is handled very nicely. Everything is all self-contained and ends on its own merits while leaving the opportunity for this to expand in the future with a mature prince who's hopefully learned his lesson.
Well, hey, back at the beginning, I mentioned how the series was inspired by the 1001 Nights. For those of you that don't know, they're a collection of simple moral stories that require the protagonist to understand the message that they're trying to convey in order to resolve the primary conflict. And as you would expect, after spending the entire game taking L's and destroying the world, our boy finally understands that in order to defeat the Vizier and undo what he has done, he needs to learn to respect and work with others. For no matter how mighty or acrobatic the prince may be, without Farah, he never would have had the opportunity or the motivation to succeed. Furthermore, he needed to learn that chasing after honor and glory, although noble prospects in theory, is kind of like chasing after internet clout, which is to say, not very important. And I mean, think about it. What even is honor? Is it slaying foes on the battlefield, or being the first to lay claim to an ultimate prize? Or perhaps, is it doing the right thing without expectation of reward or recognition? You know, I love what they did here. It's like a magical little storybook. This could almost be a movie, you know what I mean? Or maybe not.
What you can also appreciate about the story is how the prince's journey progresses in a way that feels natural and understandable. The only part that I considered to be poorly explained was the way that the Grand Rewind is portrayed. It's not exactly clear what the prince has done, other than, you know, putting the dagger inside the hourglass and rolling it back. But him rewinding back all the way to the start of the story with the dagger and nothing else probably has you wondering just how inconsistent it is.
Like, if he caca'd in his pants, will that be included in the rewind?
Now, there's an aspect of the narrative and by proxy the prince's character that might get people's panties in a twist, and it's essentially that the prince is a bit of a misogynist and more or less commits sexual assault and it's played off for laughs.
You know, they write a character like this and then hire a voice actor to portray them so that they can intentionally be put in the camel clutch, you know, to be humbled from a narrative perspective.
There's no point in the story where these negative traits or acts are portrayed in a positive light. His poor behavior only exists so that the events of the story can strip him almost quite literally of that, transforming him into a better man, which I hope you're all smart enough to understand should be inadvertently telling us, the audience or the player, to not act like this. So, long story short, don't act like a pretentious fuckwit. But my favorite part about all of this moral messaging shit and whatnot is just how concisely and efficiently all of this is portrayed. The game is around 7 to 10 hours at best, so it's pretty short, and there's no denying that very little time is wasted. Everything you need to understand about this world and its characters is very quickly and effectively conveyed to you. The main cast of characters is pretty small, really just being the prince, Farah, and the Vizier, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
You know, you just look at one cutscene involving the Vizier and you can just immediately identify everything you need to know about this guy. He's old. He's sick. He's a cunt. What more could you ask for? Also, can I just say that it's peak having a villain with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Like, it's really fucking good. None of this like moral grey shit like, oh, you know, I'm actually just misunderstood. Like, no, shut up. No, I want someone we can hate unequivocally. I just want someone that we can unanimously hate, okay? No sympathy for the villain.
These are the most important people to the plot, and having them all be very well fleshed out prevents the story from feeling bloated and allows us to appreciate them more. That's not to say that the one or two minor characters like King Shahraman and the Palace Defense System Guard
Can you help me activate the assault defense system?
don't get any characterization. They do. But again, it's just very effectively conveyed with just the right amount of focus to give you the general idea of who these people are while respecting who's the main focus of the story. The Vizier has the least characterization out of the main cast, and it's understandable. We don't get to spend a lot of time with him since he's the villain. His motivations are pretty basic and will have to be inferred from the few moments we have with him. And as I said, I personally don't think it's too much of an issue because he gives us more than a few reasons to want to stick him with the pointy end. And even if you believe that he's lacking in terms of being the antagonist, there's a lot of subtext surrounding his characterization that is pretty important that I'll touch on shortly. Farah and the Prince, on the other hand, are the main beneficiaries of having such a lean cast. We obviously witness firsthand the Prince's development, noticing his attitude shift over time and having that be contrasted with the narration that we get from the endgame Prince. A lot of your understanding from Farah, meanwhile, will come from contextual clues and cutscenes and gameplay. She'll react accordingly to how you behave, gasping in shock as you slip and fall, crying out if the Prince should die, and even calling him out if he stares at her for too long. My favourite little tidbit is that she'll fight back if you act like a retard and try to beat on her. Farah doesn't have a lot of character development per se, as her feelings for the Prince slowly develop. You'll notice how her tone shifts to be softer. At first, playing it off cool, because I know some of you are desperate, but would you really want to be down bad for the person who destroyed your home and turned you into a slave? Well, I hope not, but you never know. By the end of the game, she'll even accept the prince just outright staring at her. Showing that, yet again, you're allowed to do weird shit to women as long as they like you. Tell you what, how about we try something different and use a little infographic to summarize the point I'm going to make here. After consulting with someone much smarter than myself, the easiest way to view Farah's progression was more of a negative arc. The prince spends the whole game trying to figure himself out, and he doesn't do a very good job at it. There's plenty of ups and downs. When Farah comes along, she almost acts as a buffer, a way to temper his attitude and really prevent him from dropping any further, because if he did, he might end up something like this guy. I hope that's not too much of a hot take, because when you think about it, the vizier is characterized by his desire for personal gain, selfishness, and lack of empathy for others. Not too far off the prince at the beginning of the game, wouldn't you say? The vizier is essentially a dark mirror of the prince and a reminder of how he could end up, if not set on the right path. But anyway, back to Farah. She spends the whole game dealing with the prince's shenanigans, and it eventually culminates in the shit show at the Tower of Dawn, where the prince does something so selfish, so stupid that it almost quite literally dooms the entire world. The effect of this is so profound that instead of being a barrier that prevents the prince from regressing any further, it actually drags Farah down with him. Did I just come up with a really fancy way of describing this cutscene? As a consequence, Farah in turn does something which at this point was uncharacteristic of her, turning the visions of betrayal into a self-fulfilling prophecy. She betrays the prince and takes the burden of saving the world upon herself alone, which, as we know, just goes fucking peachy. Although it initially costs her her life, her death and what her loss represents is the catalyst that motivates the prince to change and undo what he created in his arrogance. You can say that the culmination of her negative arc, so to speak, is what propels the prince to rise above his previous errors and achieve greater heights. Now, the person who told me all of this said, bro, it's just basic storytelling. And I said, yeah, cool, but you're a But hey, guys, tell me what you thought. Did I cook here or what? A lot of emphasis is put here, and for good reason. Because guys, if you give me a moment, I want to say something insightful. When it comes to life, there's only so much you learn from conventional wisdom. All right, school's only going to teach you so much. Books are only going to teach you so much. The rest you have to learn ad hoc. You got to make mistakes, you got to fuck up, and you got to learn from them. But even then, there's only some lessons you learn from a woman who knows better. Okay? A genuine woman, believe me, they do exist, can have a profound impact on how you develop as a person. And I'm not talking about your Discord kidding, or your uncle trying to catfish you on Grindr, or a biddy at the club you hooked up with a fat bunda one time, all right? A real genuine woman. I promise you they do exist. So I relate a lot to what the prince goes through on this journey, and I'm sure some of you can as well. And if not, well, go to the gym, brush your hair, brush your teeth, take care of yourself, and just think about what areas in your life you're lacking in. But this video isn't about self-improvement or any of that shit, all right? Because self-improvement is masturbation, and, well, it's not November, but anyway. What I'm trying to say is that I appreciate the nuance here, okay? It's a good job, and I appreciate the message that they're trying to convey. Maybe you guys can understand, maybe you can't. But that's just my take. So to summarize, The Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time has a fantastic story. It emphasizes clear moral values without pushing a retarded message down your throat. It has a small, genuinely fleshed out cast that doesn't require you to get in their pants in order to understand. Let me put it to you like this. Would you prefer a 100-hour-long, bloated mess that doesn't make any logical sense in how it progresses? Or something short, sweet, memorable, or perhaps more importantly, doesn't insist upon itself? I've already taken the liberty of explaining how the gameplay works during my retelling of the story, whatever the fuck I did earlier. But during that, I mentioned several times how the narrative influences the gameplay and vice versa. No more is this evident in the centerpiece that is the Dagger of Time. The idea that we place ourselves in the shoes of a brash, reckless protagonist, and this behavior is ironically encouraged to players through having the ability to literally rewind time should we make a mistake. Is just pure gold. It just parallels so nicely with what's going on in the story. I could almost kiss the guy who came up with the idea. Speaking of which, it was this guy, Patrice Désilets. And you'll never guess where he got the inspiration from.
By playing a fucking Donald Duck Tales game, bro, you cannot make this shit up.
It really is an excellent system, and that sounds almost ridiculous saying out loud, considering it's a mechanism that now allows time travel and all the wonderful inconsistencies that come with it. But we're talking about the gameplay. And from a gameplay perspective, it's great because it alleviates a common problem with platformers, that being having to repeat entire sections because you make a single mistake. Think back to your own experiences playing a fucking Super Mario game or something, and you fuck up, and then you gotta start over again from scratch. This exact scenario is what Patrice wanted to avoid in a platformer. Thus, the rewind mechanic was born. Now, when you play the Prince of Persia, you're not burdened by that overbearing sense of anxiety. If you fuck up, just roll it back.
I just really love this mechanic, man, and you can tell that the developers put in a genuine effort to make this somewhat believable. Like, just look at the attention to detail. When you fall into the prisons, like the prince gets stunned so he can't rewind backwards, or when you get the dagger back from Farah after that sick freefall, the sands are empty. It's just so memorable and just a standout feature of this game.
Compared to the platforming, most people consider the game's combat to be a bit problematic, and unfortunately, I do tend to agree in this regard. There's only one attack combo, and it isn't very effective when compared to the prince's acrobatic maneuvers or sand powers.
Now, while I understand this as the developers trying to get players to rely on the dagger and the prince's agility, which, is essentially his point of difference compared to other swashbuckling heroes, in practice, it can make combat feel a bit bland and really take you out of the experience.
Fights can sometimes drag on for a bit with the amount of enemies that you have to fight and them spawning in batches due to technical limitations. This is a problem, especially in the late game where there's a lack of enemy variety for throwing in, I quote, tougher enemies. Once you know which moves take enemies down the fastest, you'll use them as a crutch to trivialize fights, assuming you're able to handle fighting the geometry as well. Sometimes the spaces in which these fights take place are too tight or chaotic, causing you to attack the wrong target, clip through the floor, or cause enemies to spaz out. Upon doing some further research, I learned that this was a real problem during development, and it actually caused the team to go back and handcraft each encounter we see in the final game. Now, while this does make every fight feel that little bit more unique, it's a small recourse considering that better AI would have allowed for more interesting fights in the first place. I believe this extends to Farah as well. Don't get me wrong, as far as video game companions go, she is very well designed. And again, real thought was put into how she would function in-game. However, sometimes you really have to babysit her, especially in those close quarters fights or when enemies are able to close in on her because for some reason, she'd rather stand on business instead of retreating to a superior position.
Fucking moron, do you just not have a mind for battle tactics?
The ability to blitz through enemies by using the dagger offensively with the use of sand powers is a nice touch, and you should use these abilities whenever you can to make your life a little easier. But in the early to mid game, there's a real sense that they should be used sparingly, as you'd want to prioritize absorbing enemies to gain new sand tanks.
Or at least that's how I think, because I'm sure by now most of you guys know my train of thought can be a bit suspect, to say the least.
While there still is that sense of strategic thinking I mentioned earlier in terms of managing multiple enemies, deciding when to eliminate one, and working out the best way to take different enemies down as if each one is a puzzle to solve, the combat encounters are very easily susceptible to being cheesed, and this really will spoil the experience as there's no systems in place to prevent players from removing the challenge from every combat encounter by spamming the same moves repeatedly. There's not much more I could say about the platforming that I haven't already. Sure, it's not mechanically demanding, but the variety of environments and traps that get thrown your way really does elevate the gameplay to the next level. It feels like, again, the game set the standard and tone for action-adventure platformers that followed, like Uncharted, modern Tomb Raiders, and obviously Assassin's Creed.
The fluidity and almost realistic movement cannot be understated. It still looks really good for a game this old. It really does go a long way to help sell this vision of a Persian ninja, as opposed to something silly like a black samurai.
With a mostly fully functioning adult brain, I can confidently say that the puzzle solving in this game is fine. Nothing too egregious or annoying. Water flowing puzzle aside. However, the visual cues from the environment can be too much of a giveaway in some areas, I think I would have actually preferred a little bit more puzzle solving, as it's one of the only parts of the game that doesn't come across as being overly linear.
Linear gameplay isn't a problem, mind you. Like anything, when it's done well, it works just fine.
There is only ever one way to solve a puzzle or complete a platforming section. Very few areas like that one specific section of climbing the Tower of Dawn, ascending the menagerie, or the caves that lead to the sewers are the only segments of the game where there's no obvious path forward and you have to find your own way, but even then, it's still very limited.
My suggestion would be to include false paths that the player could take. Have alternatives, but some of them would be wrong, and the player has to work out what's the right path to take through trial and error. Sure, that could have forced people to rely on the dagger more, and perhaps even bring back some of the frustration they were trying to avoid with its conception. But I still think it would have been a very nice inclusion in the game. Overall, I guess you could say the gameplay in The Sands of Time mirrors the effect the original titles had. Both have strong gameplay loops that reinforce the narrative, and were both more or less trendsetters. While The Sands of Time may not have been as revolutionary as its predecessor, well, the first one at least, and the combat is a bit lackluster, it makes up for it in the utilization of the standout rewind mechanic.
When it comes to sound in The Sands of Time, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the voice acting and soundtrack is just fucking peak. The performances from Joanna Wasick,
Whom you stole it. This is your doing.
Barry Zenon,
Only the dagger can unlock the sands of time, and it belongs to a greater one than I.
oh hey Master Lee, and Spider-Man
Alright, but this time stay with me and pay attention. Gonna get sticky!
are absolutely fantastic and bring so much life to the characters. Meanwhile, the soundtrack is filled with just back-to-back bangers. It was composed by Stuart Chatwood, who, mind you, has a very impressive list of credits from working on other soundtracks for other games, and was the bass guitarist of his own band, The Tea Party. Anyway, Stewie over here delivers a soundtrack that somehow finds a way to blend rock music with Middle Eastern influences. You might expect a game like this to go hard on the Persian theme and potentially fall victim to Orientalism,
Durka, Muhammad Jihad.
but I assure you, it's something else entirely.
There's so many memorable tracks, from the Tower of Dawn to the opening theme,
Most people think time is like a river.
to the bittersweet symphony that plays at the game's conclusion. If you ask anybody who's played this game, they'll agree that the score does not fail to deliver. Now, while the soundtrack absolutely slaps, the audio mix, on the other hand, is atrocious. Alright, you're either going to get your eardrums blown out or throw your ears into your speakers trying to hear what the fuck is going on.
As far as I understand it, the volume of a character speaking is based on their distance from the camera, so what'll happen is that sometimes you'll miss banter between the prince and Farah, and that's a real shame.
Please.
Do you mean to say you actually need my help?
What makes it worse is that not only do you have very little control over the sound in the game settings, it has very little impact and doesn't actually help solve this issue. There's no subtitles, and due to the game's age, the tech that was being used to deliver an otherwise fantastic sound isn't supported anymore. If you dig around online, you can find potential or hypothetical solutions to the problem. I tried my best, but I will admit I'm a bit fucking clueless, and so I couldn't get this fucking EAC haptic shit working. But I don't remember the console version sounding much better, and that was with the game running on a platform that required no workarounds or input from independent software.
Did any of that make sense?
However, when you can hear what's going on, it sounds amazing. The sound effects of the prince scraping and shuffling along walls and floors, the cracking and rumbling of the palace as it collapses are phenomenal. There's no ambient tracks for when you're platforming or puzzle solving. All the music is reserved for combat and cutscenes, and it really does give the opportunity for these sound effects to shine. It's a real treat for the ears and makes playing through the game all the more enjoyable.
While The Sands of Time does many things right in terms of sound, unfortunately, it's held back by technical limitations and Ubisoft being too lazy to make sure they sell a product that actually fucking works. It It was when I was doing research for this video that I watched some other content that people had produced in relation to the Sands of Time, and I came across this video here. During this video, he brought up the topic of Orientalism, which I thought was interesting because one, I didn't even know what the fuck that was, and two, people love to make a big deal out of basically nothing these days. So if you're ignorant like me, Orientalism is basically if a Western depiction of an Eastern culture could be considered racist. So basically anything out of the 80s. And I mean, that's just my definition. I'm sure you guys will let me know if I'm wrong.
Anyway, I can confidently say that this game makes full use of the Middle Eastern and Islamic culture to create something completely unique. I personally don't see how this game comes anywhere near encroaching upon the territory of being racist or culturally insensitive, which is a hilarious parallel when you consider the stunts that Ubisoft is pulling these days. The only thing that borders the line of being offensive in this game is having the prince talk with a British accent, okay? Just completely unnecessary. I don't know which genius was behind this idea, but honestly, borderline deserves to be drawn and quartered. Instead, the way this game is designed transports you to a magical, fantastical world that looks like it belongs in a culturally significant storybook where mentally unstable people will fawn over for decades.
It gives the game an atmosphere. In conjunction with the narrative, it gives it a soul. Alright, it's just fucking magical, damn it, okay? It's like you're playing through a classic fantasy tale. I don't know how else to describe it.
Sure, for the 9th century, the palace looks a little too advanced with its gears and mechanisms, but it's so well designed, you can almost believe it's real because the palace has its own character. It features environmental storytelling that doesn't require an essay-length Reddit post explaining how, as you travel through the palace, you can watch it transition from night to day, or how you can see the areas we'll visit later on from certain vantage points. The way you progress through each area feels organic, and that there was a real sense of purpose with where each area is placed. It feels interconnected and avoids the feeling of just being video game levels that could theoretically be next to each other.
It's logical while also being magical. An oxymoron, if you will.
It's similar to how the design tries its best to mask the fact that you're playing through a handcrafted video game level. Some parts are definitely better than others, and that logic can most definitely be lost. But for the most part, it's very well done. In terms of graphics, some things look absolutely fucking garbage, and there's no getting around the fact that this game was released for the 6th generation consoles in the early 2000s. It's hard to take points away for this, given how arse games looked at the time, yet you still lost your childhood to them. But with how cleverly lighting is used, it really does make up for a lot of its shortfalls, barring a few exceptions where it fails. The game features only a handful of CGI cutscenes, and they still hold up even today. Some of the animations, particularly when the prince performs the Grand Rewind, can look a little funky, but other than that, I would say they're well done. In terms of character models, the sand creatures and the prince are easily the best designed. The way the creatures glow and shift like sand really does do a great job at selling the idea of unnatural, corrupted beings in need of a good slashing and sucking, I guess. Likewise, the way that all the cloth on the prince, and by extension all the different curtains and collections of flowing fabric, add a realistic vibe to it all and help substantiate the wonderfully crafted animations. I mean, just look at that L'Oreal Paris-ass haircut. Very nice. How did a nitwit like you get so tasteful? I would say that this was above average for games that came out around the same time, and if I can be honest, is better than some of the shit we see today, because like, what the fuck even is that?
It seems to me like these days, everyone's focused on photorealism, requiring your average person to have high-end GPUs and an extra 40 gigabytes of additional space. I mean, maybe my personal preferences are bleeding through here, but I prefer these stylized games with light touches of realism, as opposed to the AI upscale, TXAA, God raise up your fucking asshole shit with motion blur, alright? Anyway, rant over. What I'm saying is that the game looks good, and that's all you need to know. The game's technical limitations have come up a few times, and I chalk this up to being a really shitty port to the PC. Now, true, you can overcome these issues easily enough. There's plenty of fixes available on the internet, but I just still find it unacceptable that the game is sold in this state. I mean, God forbid, I get what I fucking paid for, right?
Aside from that, once you get it up and running, the game is stable. There's very few bugs that I encountered throughout my various playthroughs on the PC, and I can't remember ever encountering one on the original Xbox. Sure, there were times Farah would sketch out and forget her torso.
Unless she really is that skinny.
Well, you know, we clip through the floor, but that's on very rare occasions.
I don't consider the instant death force field a bug. I think it's pretty funny.
Leading up to release, the game underwent extensive bug crushing, and it shows because there is a substantial level of polish that results in a smooth experience that, if you've got the time, can be played from start to finish in one sitting with minimal issues. I mean, that's ignoring how you can glitch through walls, but what the speedrunners do doesn't speak to how your average person is going to play through this game, but if you want a good laugh, then check out how they blitz through it. Since the release of The Sands of Time, plenty of information has been made available to the public, from documentaries to breakdowns by the lead designer detailing the highs and lows of production.
Although it's not typically my kind of thing, I managed to stumble across a breakdown prepared by Yanis following the release of The Sands of Time. It goes over the challenges that the team faced, how they overcame them, and their key drivers for success. I found it an interesting read, and maybe you guys might like it too, so I've included it in the description down below. Good luck finding someone like that for Dragon Age Veilguard. That'd be a hell of a read.
What was the most troubling thing for me to learn throughout the course of this video was that even all the way back in the early 2000s, Ubisoft still managed to somehow be absolute cunts. That might sound obvious, saying it out loud, but what do I mean by this?
Because of the positive reception when the game was initially unveiled in E3 2003, Ubisoft pulled the release date forward to coincide with the holiday season. And as a result, 1/5 of the entire game had to be cut before release. This included things like additional levels, enemies, bosses, and allegedly 80% of the content related to Farah. There was so much that the team wanted to include that they were even considering releasing it in 2 parts, a la Kill Bill style. Now, I'm of the opinion that if it wasn't for the hardships and circumstances that the team faced, we wouldn't have the product that we all know, love, and enjoy today. Besides, what's the point in sitting there thinking about what could have been? I'm going to start acting like a New Vegas fanboy if I do that.
Fortunately, plenty of cut content from The Sands of Time was repurposed and used later on, but I just find it so interesting to learn that Ubisoft's desire for moolah interfered with an ambitious project and capable team that could have potentially delivered on that vision. Now I'm just talking in hypotheticals. Maybe I am a fanboy. Continuing on from the idea of bad business decisions on the part of Ubisoft affecting quality products, you might also be surprised to learn that despite its critical acclaim upon release, the game actually sold poorly in North America. Where have we heard all of this before? And that's because Ubisoft released the game alongside Beyond Good and Evil, which, funnily enough, was a commercial failure. The Sands of Time has sold around 14 million copies to date, and thanks to someone having the business sense to find a way to get this into the hands of gamers, they were eventually able to turn sales around in the North American market.
And I mean, come on. Don't let any Joe Schmo with a 40 to fucking 2 hour long retrospective tell you about whatever the hell this is deserve the spotlight over the Sands of Time, okay?
But the best thing to come out of this business-wise was the collabs, baby. These weren't Fortnite Battle Pass, shit up my ass, cringe type crap. No, no, no. We got Prince of Persia stamps and a fucking Gillette ad. You used to be able to buy razors, and they came with a demo of the game as well as copies of the original 2 games from the 80s.
You know, say what you want, but I really don't think we had any idea just how good we had it back in the day.
In 2020, Ubisoft released a trailer for The Sands of Time remake. While the trailer looked interesting, myself and many others were quick to notice that something was off. The graphics looked dated. And I know that's ironic, considering I thought the originals were fine. It was just the lighting. It made the game look bland and uninspiring. Sure, the way they touched up the character designs for the Prince, Farah, and some of the more iconic areas of Azad looked nice, but it wasn't enough to win us over. Aside from concerns about graphical fidelity, the gameplay also looked different. The idea of making changes to the original's combat given it was its worst aspect makes sense, but again, it seemed dull. Regardless of everyone's initial impressions though, there wasn't enough information for anyone to form a legitimate opinion about a game that hadn't been released. So we were all consigned to waiting for further details. In 2021, we got some of those details, and it was that the game was delayed. We got that notification twice. But if that didn't have you concerned about where things were headed, you didn't have to wait long for confirmation. In 2022, Ubisoft announced that the remake was delayed indefinitely. The word on the proverbial street was that there was a real lack of direction and challenges during development. And so, for a good while, that's where things stood until June 2024, when Ubisoft released another teaser, citing 2026 as the year the prince would return again. Things have been pretty quiet since then. However, as they say, history does tend to repeat itself. Insider knowledge from Tom Henderson indicates that while the game is still in active development, it's currently experiencing a lack of direction and a challenging development. Oh boy. I feel pretty confident in saying that this game's going to be an absolute shit show, and I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. I'd like to think that by now, most of us are used to this kind of chicanery and are hesitant to get excited about something that's already been delayed and had openly reported issues about development. Sure, there's a chance that it could turn it around and it could be everything we dreamed of and more, but I'll be reserving judgment, and I hope you do the same. Remember, no pre-orders. The only thing that would get me excited for the remake is if they went to the effort of adding in some of the cut content from the original and bring the vision the guys down at Ubisoft Montreal had to life with modern technology. Now, I know that's naive considering that's not how the world works, and expecting a project made with the right mix of passion, ambition, and competence, all while being financially viable for the investors, is borderline impossible. Maybe it's just me, but it's hard to view remakes as being nothing more than just cash grabs. I intend to talk about this more in a future video where I go over remakes, and by extension remasters, but my opinion is essentially this. If you're just taking a formula that someone's already designed, that you know resonates with players, and you're just putting it in a new engine and slapping on a fresh coat of paint, how much praise do you realistically deserve? Sure, that's a gross oversimplification, but forgive me if I'm not very lenient, and please tell me why I shouldn't put down the multi-million-dollar company. So until the day finally comes along when someone finds that right balance between trying to make a quick buck off our desire to escape from reality and delivers a quality product worth our time and money, I'm perfectly content with the same game that I've enjoyed for the last 15 years. It wasn't my intention in this video to bring up all this old shit to just reminisce about the past and be depressed about the future. More so, to inspire a bit of reflection and provide a bit of insight. As I was preparing this video, I came across all of these things that I know we'd seen before. Ubisoft being fucking retarded, Kevin O'Leary pump and dump schemes, and unnecessary video game crunch brought on by executive suite dickheads looking to make just a little bit more money. You know, where have we heard all of this before? You know, the prince said that time is like a river. But honestly, I can tell you that's wrong. Time is more like a circle, destined to repeat itself because people are just too fucking dense to learn from their mistakes. And just as they're unwilling to admit what was wrong, they also don't know what they're missing out on. But I guarantee you, if you haven't experienced it before, this will be a tale like none you have ever heard. It can feel clunky. At times, it can play atrociously. And sometimes, you'll question if the developers had functioning ears when they shipped it for release. But The Sands of Time has something that some games, modern and old alike, don't have. It has a soul. It has an identity. It's not a game where you unleash your mental deficiencies disguised as roleplay. It's a game about a naive prince who, despite being blessed with physical ability, lacks immaturity and unleashes catastrophe with his hubris. It's the classic hero's journey with clear, discernible goals. Save the world and get the girl. It's simple and effective. And what makes this game stand out from so many others is how the narrative is expertly woven into the gameplay. It doesn't just create an experience that feels substantial because the gameplay has meaning. It's timeless. So ladies and gentlemen, if you yearn for that good old-fashioned narrative storytelling and action adventure,
then the Sands of Time is the game for you. I've had the joy of experiencing it many times, and I hope you can too. But hey, who knows? Maybe I'm just nostalgic and talking out of my ass, and this game's actually dog shit. Imagine that. Anyway, that's enough out of me for today. I'm tired of talking, and you're probably tired of listening, so let's just call it there. All right? Huge thank you, as always, to the friends and family who have helped me prepare this video. It's always appreciated. And likewise, thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao ragazzi.